Thank you, Peter, for that warm introduction. And thank you to Supportive Living for the work that you're doing to impact the lives of those living with brain injuries. Um, and I'm thankful for your focus on music here tonight, too. And it's an honor for me to be here with you. And today I'm going to talk at a very high level about music and neuroscience and how that can be clinically applied to help people recover from brain injuries, things like movement, language, and cognition. And I'm going to share my screen here to walk you through some of these slides. Now, all of this work on music, we've focused on music for this evening, and it's around this premise that music has power. And I think that that's something that we can all agree on, that music has power. And when we think about what type of power does music have, what kind of power does it have? We think about those things where music can shift our emotions. It can build us up. It can help us feel happy, feel sad, feel motivated. It can get our adrenaline going. It certainly can bring people together socially. Certainly also we know that there's types of music that can speak things when words fail. And that's what we consider to be the social science power of music, about how music makes us feel. But with advancements in neuroimaging and neuroscience technology, we've now begun to understand the power of music through the lens of neuroscience. And that's what I'm going to be focusing on tonight, is shifting that lens from music as a social science to purely music as a neuroscience. And the recent advancement, as I said, in the neuroscience and neuroimaging technology has allowed us to understand music in an objective new way. And everything that I'm going to tell you about tonight briefly applies to 97% of the human population, regardless of age, culture, ability, or disability. Everybody's brain responds the same to music. And it really, at a high level, it comes down to these two principles of global activation and neuroplasticity. And what global activation means is that what the research shows is that when we as humans passively listen to music that we like, it engages the parts of our brain that are responsible for movement, language, attention, memory, emotion. And there's no other stimulus on earth that engages our brain as globally, simultaneously, as music does. Principle number 2 is neuroplasticity, the reason why we can learn new skills as we age, and the reason why people who have injuries to the brain can recover. It's been shown that engaging in music, so learning a new instrument, or casually and informally singing in a choir or singing it at home, or engaging in some of these interventions that I'm about to show you, can aid in the process of neuroplasticity. So when we think about global activation and neuroplasticity, that gives us an enormous new opportunity to help people in a novel way. I'm going to focus on 3 sections tonight very briefly: movement, language, and cognition. When we think about music for movement, it all comes down to the power of rhythm. And I'm going to show you a very brief video here of the power of rhythm. Normally, if I was with you in person, at this point, I would do a live demonstration with somebody in the audience. But given the times, we'll do this via video. This is a man who has Parkinson's disease. And you're going to notice his presentation of as he's walking with Parkinson's disease, that he's taking very short steps, and he has episodes here and here of what we call freezing of gait, where he's stuck. Parkinson's being a movement disorder, it impacts the way that we move. So he's going to walk back over towards the camera, and you're going to see him have another episode of severe freezing, where essentially his brain is not giving his body the signal to move, and he gets stuck. He's going to turn away from the camera here in just a moment, and he's going to turn on music. Also keep in mind, walking backwards with Parkinson's is also very difficult, but he's going to turn on music that's at an up-tempo, that is up-tempo, and also has a strong beat strength. And you're going to notice the impact that it has on his movements when he walks to the beat of the music. You notice his strides are bigger. Turning doesn't seem to be an issue. Going fast. See the movement in his legs, walking backwards when he steps to the beat of the music. It's an instant and powerful phenomenon. And that ability to walk to the beat of the music is what we call entrainment. And what entrainment is actually our brain's ability to synchronize our motor system to the auditory system. What the research shows is that when we as humans hear a rhythm that repeats in our environment, something that's consistent like a song, that it activates our auditory system, and that our auditory system is subconsciously connected to our motor system via what's called the reticulospinal tract. So that when we hear an external auditory cue like music that's consistent in our environment, it activates our auditory system and subconsciously engages the motor system to move in time with the music. And when I say that's subconscious, meaning we don't have to think about walking to the beat of the music, it happens subconsciously. And in fact, in order for us to not walk to the beat of the music, we actually have to come up with some sort of cognitive strategy to not listen to what's in our environment. And so that auditory and motor system synchrony is called entrainment. And then as we think about implementing this clinically, that comes into play in seeing how people walk to the beat of the music. This idea of entrainment has recently been translated into an intervention called rhythmic auditory stimulation in about the mid-1990s. And this has been studied across neurologic disease or injury, showing how engaging in the intervention improves outcomes like speed, symmetry, stride length, etc., across neurodisease and injury states. So this is a video of me delivering rhythmic auditory stimulation at Spaulding Rehab Hospital in Boston. And this is a man who has had a stroke. You'll notice that he has very short stride length. He's walking with a cane. His right side is affected, so his right side is not taking the same size steps as his left side. We call that asymmetry. He's walking very slowly and he's very rigid. This video is after he's had physical therapy 5 days a week for an hour a day for 3 weeks. So he's had about 15 sessions of therapy at this point. The rest of this video is one 45-minute session. What we do in rhythmic auditory stimulation is we calculate how fast he was walking, 65 steps per minute. We start music at 65 beats per minute to see if they can entrain. So we're going to watch here to see if he can walk to the beat of the music. We see here initially, he's able to step very well to the beat of the music. The goal with him is to increase the tempo of his walking. So we increase the tempo of the music by 5% to see if he can walk faster. And we notice that he does well. And then from here, we thought, well, what happens if we could take the cane away? So he had never walked without a cane prior to this point, but we know that evolutionarily, as human beings, as bipedal beings, we are made to shift our weight between 2 points rather than 3. And we see in the hospital all the time when we teach people to use canes or walkers, it oftentimes can be much more awkward because we're not evolutionarily made to do it. So we thought, let's take the cane away and see if we can get him to entrain between 2 points and not 3. And this is his first time walking post-stroke without a cane. 1, 2, 3. So we see that he does very well. Symmetry is getting a little bit better. Stride length is a little bit short. So we continue to speed up the tempo of the music. We see some improvements in his stride length here, continued improvements in symmetry. So over the course of the session, we continue to speed up the tempo of the music. And we see drastic differences here. But the important point is, does the impact last when the music's taken away? So at the end of the session, we remove the music and we ask them to walk again, and we see this level of carryover. Evidence of neuroplasticity, that there's actually a functional change happening when engaging in the music. And so to give you context, here's this baseline video after 3 weeks of physical therapy, 5 days a week for an hour a day to get him to this point. And this is 45 minutes later. So a profound impact of music to the motor system to improve walking. also been shown to actually aid in neuroplasticity, as I mentioned. Recent research showing that engaging in musical cues to movement can actually induce microstructural change in white matter pathways. This also applies to anything that's motor related, arms, hands, etc. We can use movement, we can use music to improve quality of movements. I know this was very quick. That was the movement section. Now we're going to talk about speech and language, so the impact of music to improve language abilities. At a high level, we know that music or speech is primarily a left-sided brain function. So the left side of our brain is responsible for expressive language. But we know that music, as I said at the beginning, globally activates our brain. So it's equally distributed through our left and right hemisphere. And so oftentimes people who have damage to the left hemisphere of their brain have what's called aphasia. They have the inability to speak expressive language. Comprehension is good, but expressive language is poor. But we know that oftentimes those folks can actually sing even though they can't speak. So we have an intervention that's called melodic intonation therapy, where we can improve somebody's ability to speak through what looks like singing. For example, we try to practice functional phrases that people would need to speak in everyday life. Something like, I need the bathroom. By saying the phrase, I need the bathroom, is primarily a left-sided brain function. But if we simply add a rhythm and intonation to that same phrase, I need the bathroom, that engages the right hemisphere of our brain because it's melodic and rhythmic in nature. So you're going to see this video of a man who's had a stroke, who has severe aphasia, has no expressive language, but has good comprehension. So he understands everything, but no expressive language. Try it again. I'm Peter. You notice in this section that he doesn't get the words exactly right, but he begins to be able to approximate the sounds. I'm Peter. I'm Peter. How are you? How are you? So we did intensive treatment over the course of a couple of months, and this is Peter now.
Hello, I'm Peter. How are you? I am good. Thank you. How are you? You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray.
So a big impact on music for language. And this is research that has shown for people that were not musicians, who have no background in music, that doing intensive melodic intonation therapy can actually change the thickness of what's called the arcuate fasciculus, which is the fiber tract that connects your receptive language area to your expressive language area. So literally showing that engaging in music changes the anatomy of the brain. And this type of intervention can also be administered in community choirs, which at MedRhythms we run, which we see also the big impacts not only to their functional language, but also to the social impact of bringing people together through a singing group. And this is actually a picture of our aphasia choir performing in the Hancock Building downtown Boston. And then very high level of music in cognition. There's interventions for attention, divided attention, alternating attention, neglect that some of our patients suffer with, hemispatial neglect, memory issues, executive function, orientation. And then there's this piece, which I think is some of the most profound research that's been done in the field of music and neuroscience, where they actually looked at people in a vegetative state, so severe brain injuries. And what they found through neuroimaging, where they presented these patients with silence, white noise, recorded music, and live preferred music, what they actually found was that the patients showed higher levels of arousal and awareness in response to live preferred music. Arousal being eye-opening, and awareness being interacting with their environment in response to live preferred music. Meaning giving us the questions to try to understand if music has such a profound impact in this population that is so low functioning. Imagine the impact that if we understood this more, that it could have to the system of healthcare. And I always leave people with this, that I'm lucky enough to be able to do this work every day. And that and the experience of doing that along with the research and the growth of this field, I think the better we understand how music impacts the brain, it will change the landscape of global healthcare because it's that important. And the advancements of technology will help us to get there as well. So thank you for your time. It's an honor to be here with you. And thank you again, Supportive Living, for all that you do for this community. It's an honor to be here with you. And this is my contact information. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions that folks have. Thank you very much.